Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Alexis Sullivan on the podcast. She's an IFBB pro and 2018 Olympian coming to us all the way from Jersey, as I like to pronounce it. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Alexis, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I first got to ask, though, what is the weather like in Jersey today?
It's kind of mushat. It's been raining all week, and I'm just not okay with it. But it's supposed to clear up tomorrow for the weekend, so fingers crossed.
Hopefully we can get it like that. I mean, it's the same here in Minnesota. We just got done with a really big rainstorm last night, and it's still cloudy out today. So before we depress everyone, I won't ask any more weather questions. But why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what inspired and what motivated you to get in shape and then to become a bodybuilder?
So, to start with my history, I have to give you a little bit of background on my husband. My husband and I, we've been together for about 15 years, but he's been a fan of bodybuilding his entire life. So when we first started dating, he was big and into the sport of bodybuilding, and me, I didn't understand it. It just wasn't a thing for me. And then, we started dating at 19. We both went to college, blah, blah, blah. After college, is when I started to tiptoe my way into the gym I was like cardio bunny in the beginning, as most people are. It's very intimidating, all the machines, you don't really know what's going on, you don't know what to do. And then my husband said to me, Jimmy, he said to me, like, do you want me to show you, how to train? And I was like, oh yeah, sure, I guess. So we started off with the baby steps, but very, very quickly, I found myself really enjoying training and fitness and working out and pushing myself. So as soon as he kind of introduced me to the whole lifestyle of fitness and bodybuilding, I just kind of jumped in with both feet, and I've been running that direction ever since.
That is so awesome how he was really into it when you got started, and then now you're an IFBB pro. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that was his plan all along. He was like just trying to baby step.
Well, it's funny because when we first started dating, what he used to say to me is that I have show winning legs, and I never understood what he meant until very recently. And I'm like, oh yeah, now I get it.
Yeah, if he said that to you first off, I'd be like, oh, okay, what? Like, okay, yeah, that's so awesome. And that sort of leads me into the first question that I love to ask all the health and fitness guests, because I just find it so fascinating that if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to the overall package that people end up seeing. And I always like to say, if you were to walk up to someone and say like, hey, what did you train for that body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time is not going to work as good for you. Was that a struggle for you when you were getting started with the weight aspect, where it was finding out what worked best specifically for your body?
Still to this day, things change. It's never a one size fits all, and it never will be. And, that's kind of what's frustrating sometimes to understand at first, because you see people do certain exercises, you see people eating a certain way, you see people performing exercises in a certain fashion. And, I can use my husband and myself, for example. He has very long legs. So performing a squat for him and performing a squat for me, two completely different, where you're going to place your feet, where your knees are going to go, your stance, where you're bending at the hips. So, just in broader terms, it really does take, a little bit of playing around, tweaking, moving to find out exactly how to get that mind muscle connection and really what works for you and what works best for you. Because some moves, frankly, I try to do them and, they bother my elbow or they bother my shoulder. So I will shy away from that. But overall, it is just a constant learning process, and be able to just roll with the punches. You just got to be able to just roll with it.
Well, and I always say you're kind of like a mad scientist too, where you're just trying to concoct your own personal potion that works best for you when you're going into the gym. But I understand what your husband's going through, because I'll reveal it later on in the next question, because I always like to say, I mean, this is probably my favorite question to ask, because everyone's genetics are differently. So everyone has that one body part when they get started in the gym that really, really takes off. And everyone always has that one body part that lags behind. I'll give you my examples first. So for me, my back, I had jobs all throughout college that were, lifting and loading heavy packages into trucks, up to 150 pounds for 8 hours sometimes. And, it was a part-time, so it'd be like 3 times a week, but still you either got to really develop back or you quit. That's basically the two things that my boss would always tell. So that's
Hmm.
really my background for that body part. But I'm 6'3", so my lower body is just absolutely shot. We're like, as soon as you said your husband has long legs, I was like, yeah, he's preaching to the choir right then and there. So me doing squats too, that is a sight to see in the gym, just
Wow.
going down and bending down. So yeah, for me, my legs are just, my total and calves too, because I got to say calves, that's the number one genetic part. Where I mean, you either have them or you don't. And I see someone with nice calves walking, I was like, okay, you didn't train them a day in your life. I was like, God, that just gets me. Yep. So what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
My legs respond very well. And I don't know if that's because I used to run track and cross country, in middle school and high school. But my legs just, I mean, my mom has bigger legs. So I think genetically I just have more muscle mass to begin with there. And so growing them was never really an issue. For me, I struggle with my shoulders. My shoulders just really don't want to grow, and my back width. So I mean, everyone has those body parts that they struggle with, but you just gotta keep going.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean that's why I love asking that question. The most surprising answer for me is some guy said, "Oh, my forearms." That's the thing that took off the most, and I was like, "Okay, well that's really really specific." So I don't know what that's all about. But then we've had other answers too, where like one guy was like, "Oh yeah, like my wrists are like really really," and I was like, I guess I was like, I don't know how you can determine that, but I mean, it's like more power to you. But that's why I love asking that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, that's why I love asking that question because you never know what answers you're gonna get. But how long into your journey into weight training and getting bigger and stronger before you decide to try doing a show?
Uh, when did I graduate college? In 2004, 2008. I graduated college in 2008. Um, and that's when I kind of tiptoed my way into the gym, starting with the cardio and all that. And then it wasn't until 2013, my husband and I moved into an apartment, and we found a gym run by an ex IFBB pro, Stokely Palmer, and called the Lion's Den. It was a great gym, beautiful Atlantic equipment. It was amazing. And so we started training there, and it was, more of a hardcore bodybuilder style gym. And it was actually Stokely originally who had said to me, hey, maybe you should try doing a show. And I was just like, okay. So, I did a show. My first show was October of 2013. And I immediately just kind of fell in love with the entire process. And, being able to transform your body that way through nutrition and through diet and cardio and training, it was very magical for me because I didn't know you could physically change, the shape and structure of your body like that. So once I did one show, I was hooked. And Stokely had prepped me for that first show, but for my next show in 2014 up until currently, my husband has been my trainer and my coach.
What's that been like being married to your coach? Because sometimes we've had, so it's been hot or cold for some people because then they're like, oh, when we're both like really depleted for like shows or whatever, you do not want to be around us or like talking to each other.
I don't get cranky, and neither does he. Like, I'm not like a cranky person. I enjoy doing this. No one's putting a gun to my head. So for me, it's something that I like the process, and so does he. And him being a lifelong fan, it's like a dream come true. Being able to go to these pro shows, go backstage, go to the Olympia. It's just been kind of a whirlwind for him, and the fact that we get to do it together it makes it just so special.
Well, and that's so awesome too to have that support system because I always say we've had so many people come on who have said, I did my first show by myself. I kind of, just tried to figure that out, but it's just so much easier to have that support system, especially
Absolutely.
when it comes to your diet and your nutrition. I mean, I cringe a little bit whenever someone says, like I tried it first, I'm all by myself and I'm like, oh, but then, they usually learn the hard way that, hey, I got to get a coach, I got to get a trainer
Mhm.
to really help me out. But what would you say is probably the biggest nutritional change that you had to make going from your diet before you started to go on a prep to going on a prep?
I was always very health conscious. I was never like, I don't want to sound awful, but I was never like, I never ate like a slob. Like, I was always very kind of aware of what I was eating. And I actually was a vegetarian for 8 years, which I don't know. I have nothing against people. Obviously, I eat tons of meat now, but I just was like, I don't know. I don't have an explanation for it. But anyway, so I was a vegetarian for 8 years, and I was all about the vegetables and the tofu and the healthy fats. So that was me in high school and college. So it just, once I kind of transitioned into like the whole bodybuilding lifestyle, it was kind of like I was already there in terms of what I was eating. You just kind of taper down your selection. Instead of having a wide selection of vegetables, cut it down. Instead of a wide selection of protein, you kind of cut it down. So it wasn't really drastic for me.
What is your go-to meat that you like to eat during prep?
I like chicken and I really like wild cod. Like I'm a fan of wild cod because I take it and I cook it in the pan. I put a little coconut oil in the pan, throw it in the pan with some salt and some cinnamon, and you cook it up like that, and it gets a little crispy on the outside, and it tastes just like buttered popcorn.
Yeah, that's wild caught. I never would have thought that because
Mhm.
actually one of the guests that I had on yesterday too, she couldn't eat chicken because for some reason she'd always get bloated when she did that. So she had turkey and bison. So that's why
Yeah.
I always thought, chicken was just for like all the bodybuilders. But then I'm slowly
Mm-mm.
learning, as I have more and more guests on that,
There is no, there are no rules in this. People think, oh, I have to eat chicken, or close to a show, I have to eat tilapia. No, you don't. No, you don't. Eat whatever works for you. So
I can guarantee I'm not going to pull a Dwayne the Rock Johnson and have like 10 pounds of asparagus every day. I can guarantee you that
I
much.
love asparagus. So I don't know. I could take him up on that 10-pound
I know I
challenge.
see some of his stuff on Instagram and I'm like, okay, first of all, it's like watching him work is just unbelievable. But I always say if you were to poll the general public, I mean, you'd get such a small percentage of people, probably like 5% of the general public would be having that determination and that willpower to be able to get into shape to go on a prep because you need to get into very good shape just to be able to go onto a prep. But then when you go on a prep, that is notching things up to an extreme when it comes to your cardio, when it comes to your meals. I mean, everything has to be planned and prepped. It just becomes so scientific. What is that adjustment like for you when you go from the off season to where you go on prep where everything just becomes so scientific?
It's a little bit gradual. I'm normally an all or nothing person. I'm either like not in prep or I'm in prep. But I've been really trying to work on that because the two extremes, it doesn't really work for me. There's like a transition period. For me, it's about maybe 3 weeks where it's not even so much like, yeah, I mean, I'm still eating my meals now. I'm still doing the cardio now. I'm still training now. It's the mindset. And that switch doesn't flip automatically. And I think a lot of people sort of don't pay enough attention to getting the mind ready for a prep because when you're in prep, that's your focus. You wake up every single day thinking, breathing. I mean, it's not something that you do just after work or just on the weekend. It has to be every waking moment because everything you're putting in your body, everything you're doing to your body is going to affect ultimately the outcome of how you look. So that mental switch takes a little bit to sort of work my way into. So for me, there's maybe like a 3 week period where we're like starting prep, but really it's like getting me mentally prepared to jump in with both feet and full steam ahead.
Do you think your background in track and field has made your cardio a little bit easier, or is it still just a pain in the butt like it is for almost everyone that I talk to?
I think it actually has. I have a really slow heart rate, and my cardiovascular endurance is very, very good. My issue with cardio, I mean, everyone gets bored because it's just boring. Let's face it. My issue is I have really, really bad debilitating shin splints, and I have really, really tight peroneals. So I can't do things like the stairs. Like I cannot do the stairs, and I mostly just do high incline walking, like super high incline, like 20 to 30%, or the elliptical. So instead of boredom, I'd say my biggest challenge for cardio is actually pain.
I can get that too, just because I said I'm 6'3". I was 6'3" when I was in seventh grade. I was one of those kids that really that grew really really quick and then stopped growing. So I had Osgood slaughter for I think like 2 years when I was in eighth and ninth grade. So that's basically where it's not like shin splints, but that's just where you've grown so much so quickly, where it's kind of your body kind of it's not really proportioned enough to really. I mean, I still
Okay.
look normal, but it's like so like my legs were a little bit out of whack just because I grew way
Mhm.
too fast. Like I had a summer where I grew like I think it was like 7 or 8 inches over the summer,
No.
which I mean, first of all, the reaction that I got from the ladies was priceless. Going back to school, then so that was that made everything worthwhile. But it was just honestly just absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, just and those just being able to do cardio then with that too. I mean, that's just I mean, more power to anyone that does that because that just adds on, I think, to the stuff that I love to just say that bodybuilders really have to go through that the general public just doesn't understand. probably my favorite thing to ask about, because I mean, this is the number one myth that I would have never guessed in my entire life. Or I shouldn't say myth, it's the number one thing that I found out, would have never guessed in my entire life. But for so many of these competitors, posing is the hardest thing for them. It's harder than your nutrition. It's harder than your working out. That's what I've come to find. And that's not for everyone, but I like to compare it now to being a great driver or a perfect driver, where you can be a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
I love posing. I do. Full disclosure, I much more enjoy the women's physique posing because I just find it more artistic. I find it more free flowing. You can give a little bit more of yourself within it. Posing is very beautiful. You know, it's statuesque. You know, the quarter turns. You know, your chest up. You see the beautiful round delts and the legs. But you have a little bit more fun and sass. You know, with the women's physique posing. In terms of my experience in posing, whether I found it difficult or not, it's a learned skill, and it's a skill that's always evolving because my body's always changing. So a pose or a way that you're going to handle, position yourself on stage one year may not look so great the next year because your body has changed. So that's also something that you have to take in consideration when you're working on it, because it's your skill, it's your craft. And at the end of the day, you could look phenomenal on Instagram, you could look great in the gym, but if you can't present your physique in the best light possible on stage, it doesn't really matter.
That's what I always like to say. You could be the most in shape person on the planet, and if you don't know how to pose, good luck to you. But out of your physique poses, what is your favorite and what is your least favorite?
Oh, my favorite pose. I don't know. I think I like the back double by. I like that one because I like my glutes, and I have a lot of detail on my back, which is a lot of fun. And actually, a figure my side pose I really like because I feel like it gives me more of like a 3D look. Because my delts really pop. You see the nice sweep. My glutes are in. My tiny waist. So it just kind of. I feel like my side pose is one of my stronger poses.
Well, and I always gotta say, if I ever competed, my favorite would be anything back, just because, well, first of all, my back, but then secondly, you can kind of let your face down a little bit. You don't have to be smiling all the time. You can kind of just, you guys just breathe a little bit where you don't have to be. Because honestly, one of the guests that I had on too earlier this week, she was talking about how she didn't get a good enough placing, and she was told that if she would have smiled a little bit more, it might have helped.
It's funny that you mentioned that. In one of my earlier amateur shows, I don't know, a couple of years ago, that was something the judge said. And it wasn't during the quarter turns. It was when I was standing on the side and they were reshuffling people. He said, "You dropped your smile." I remember that. One of the judges said, "You dropped your smile." And I was like, oh, okay. So, I mean, that's actually something I do practice during cardio, is smiling during cardio, because my mouth gets tired of like holding that forever when you're on stage. So that's something I actually practice, is the smile.
I gotta say, probably the jaws of some of these competitors are probably the thing that goes through the most punishment during these posing sessions than probably anything
I
else.
don't doubt it.
But yeah, and that's just. But I never asked this, but for guy bodybuilders, do they have the same thing where they have to keep smiling, or for them is it just more they can get away with such?
They can get away with like the grimace and the angry face, I think, for the most part. I think it looks more aesthetically pleasing to see someone smile
Yeah,
on stage, versus like the angry
yeah.
face. But they're working so hard to squeeze like every single part of their body that I give them a pass.
I was gonna say, because when I've seen just like clips, like random clips of just like guy bodybuilders, it doesn't seem like they're normally smiling as much. So yeah, I find that very interesting. But now being in figure, the heels. What has your experience been like wearing those heels? Because I always say it's hard enough to start posing, but to make people wear heels and go on and pose, I mean, that just adds an extra level of complication. Was that a difficulty for you, just learning how to do that in heels?
No, I used to wear the heels around the house. I always do all my practice posing in heels, and I don't wear platforms. So I know a lot of girls, and I'm shorter, so a lot of shorter girls do wear like the really high platforms. I don't know if that hurts me or helps me, but I'm fairly comfortable in my shoes. I don't have an issue with that.
I was gonna say I only ask you that because you're from Jersey. One of my biggest mistakes on this podcast was I asked a girl from Texas if she'd ever had any experience in high heels. I got berated for about a good minute because never question a girl from the South if she's ever worn high heels, because they're basically born in them. Apparently, she's like, "Child, please, I was born in high heels," and I was like, "Okay, yeah, I understand that," but yeah, some of our guests struggle with that a little bit. But now I mean, as you can tell, I'm one of the palest people you'll ever meet in your entire life. Just my thick Norwegian skin. I mean, I cannot go out in the sun without an SPF of 1 million. And I was at a Twins baseball game about 2 weeks ago, and I'm still peeling off skin from my forearms. And I was only in the sun for about 15 minutes. So I don't know, again, I either get burnt to an absolute crisp or I get a farmer's tan, where let's be honest, that is not a real tan. I've never been tan a day in my life. Bodybuilders get tan. What is that experience like for you when you get that tan on and you see everything really seems to pop? And we have so many guests talk about how you see muscles that you never even knew that you had. What is that experience like for you?
Well, for me, tanning has actually been one of the challenges that I have in my professional career, in that I have very, like you, very, very fair skin. So if I don't get enough base coats the night before, it doesn't matter how much bronzer they put on me the day of the show. It's like the lights just go right through. And I'm usually the lightest person on stage all the time. And it's a frustration for me. And I've tried different tanning companies and whatnot. And, some companies are really great. Absolute Touch, the company in Toronto, they do a fabulous job. Protan at the Olympia did a fabulous job. But again, those were times where they really sort of listened to me and put on the amount of base coats that I needed. In Toronto, I think I did like 6 or 7 base coats before the bronzer the next day. And same thing with the Olympia. So for me, it's been kind of like a challenge and like a little bit of source of anxiety beyond like everything else you think you'd worry about. I kind of worry about my tan because I'm like, I don't want to come up too light. But when they get it right, it's awesome. Like when they get it right, it's just awesome. And then you love it and you're like, yeah, I look so jacked. This is great. But then by the end of the day, you're like, get this off of me right now.
Sullivan, that's Irish, I can presume, right?
Yeah, my husband is Scottish and he's Scottish and Italian.
I was gonna say, yeah, normally when with the light skin, I mean anything Scandinavian, anything Irish, anything
But
British. I
he's
mean,
got great skin. Like he tans like no problem. You
well, that's
just go
part of
on
his
tan.
Italian in him, I guess. Then.
It is. Yeah, his brother has very, very dark skin.
So yeah,
So
they get a little bit luckier on that, but we gotta find our different tricks. But I always say it's another thing that I never got to, is that you can't sit on anything, you can't stand against anything when you have that tan on. I mean, you have to bring
well,
your own
the
bed
tanning
sheets.
has gotten
Oh,
better.
it
Like
has.
tanning has got yeah, it's gotten better where it gets on you. Once it dries, you're good. And then backstage, the help is great. I've even seen, backstage they do the touch ups. They'll help you with the glaze, and then I've even seen, where was I think it was the show in Pittsburgh. They actually had like a mini sprayer, and so they could even spray if something happened, like you really got like a bad mark. They could even respray you real quick before getting on stage. So
Can I just say it took way too damn long for them to come up with a tan that wouldn't run off, because like we've had people that have done it for like 20 years and they're like, I'm still waiting for that tan to not be to just be able to dry so I can like actually like sit on
it
stuff and
also
stand against
depends
stuff.
on the person's skin type,
Oh, okay.
and if they have more oily skin or dry skin. And also some people sweat more when they're on stage, so that obviously will have a huge effect on the tan. I don't sweat when I'm on stage. Like I'm usually a very very dry going into peak week. That's just how I am. So I never had an issue with like the tan running or anything like that.
Yeah, I sweat like a rainstorm. So, I'm one of those people where I'm at the gym. People think that I work a lot harder than I actually do because my entire t-shirt will just be absolutely drenched in sweat. So, it's a benefit and a curse. So I guess I could really never have one of those tans on because basically, it would honestly just melt off of me. But I like to ask this question for all of my guests that I have on, whether they be, my up and coming bands and musicians or my bodybuilders or health and fitness. For my bands, I always ask, what is that feeling like when you get to, go on stage and perform live in front of hundreds to thousands of people? That also applies to the bodybuilders that I have on. What is that experience like for you when you get to walk up on stage and show off all of that hard work that you've worked months upon months for?
I love it. It's the highlight for me. You spend so much time building, crafting, sweating, sacrificing, doing what you do, doing all the cardio, lacking on the sleep, not eating anything. And then finally, you like, being backstage, especially at a pro show, like we just look so good. Like I always say that I just look around at myself and the girls around me and I'm like, damn it, we look so freaking good. And then just being able to present that when I get on stage. And for me, when I get on stage, I really kind of think in my head, like I don't like to overwhelm myself too much thinking like, oh my gosh, all these people are looking at me. For me, it's the judges and my family. Like I am here, for them. And everything else just kind of blurs into the background. And I love it. I just, it's just, a sense of euphoria, and it's crazy because it happens so quickly. You spend like 4 or 5 months prepping and you're on stage for like 30 seconds, but it really does make it all worth it. And it's an addiction. Like once you get that high from being on stage, you want it again and you want it again and you want it again. And it's, yeah, I love it. I really love it.
That's one thing that I've heard all the time. And yeah, I couldn't even imagine what that experience would be like for me. But what was that like for you when you won your pro card? And for everyone out there who might not be familiar with bodybuilding, when you win your pro card, that's basically, for a lot of people, that's the highlight of their career, because that's the affirmation that they get that, all that hard work that they put into it has really come to fruition. And you're a pro. You can compete at the pro shows, you can go to the Olympia usually. And
Mhm.
it's just so important for so many people. What was that experience like for you when you finally won your pro card?
It was wild. It was wild because I had done previously that year. In early July, I did Team U, excuse me, NPC Universe, and I placed fifth. So doing the Universe was an eye opener for me because, of course, like I thought I looked good, but then once you get on the stage with those other girls, you're like, no, I got to step it up another notch. So the weeks between the Universe and North Americans, where I won my pro card at the end of August, beginning of September in Pittsburgh, I really just lit a fire underneath my ass. And going into North Americans, I just felt good. Like I had a good feeling. And I'm not someone who's like, I'm gonna win, I want first place. That's because ultimately it's not what it's about. It's about bettering yourself and enjoying it. And yeah, you want to win, but if you base your entire bodybuilding lifestyle around getting a plastic trophy, you're going to be really disappointed because that's not what it's all about. But I had a good feeling going into North Americans, and I just felt confident. And I think I really radiated that confidence on stage during my presentation because I went up, I did my model walk, I came back, we did quarter turns, and then as soon as they pulled us out to do first call outs, Sandy was the head judge, and she pointed right at me, and she's like, and they put me in the box, and they didn't move me. So once they stuck me in that box, my husband was saying that he was in the audience like, don't move her, don't move her, don't move her. And yeah, they switched everybody, kept me in that box, and then they sent me off stage, and it was just like whoosh. It was just like this crazy feeling. But again, you never know. So you don't want to count, your chickens before they hatch, because I've seen it happen before. There's an even number of girls on stage. You may be in that box, but you may not be first. So, but it was a really, really good feeling, a sense of accomplishment. And, you just feel humbled because you're like, I think there were like 400 figure girls at North Americans. And I don't know how many were in my class, but it was a very, very big class. And, to have the judges feel as though I presented a physique that can compete with on the pro level, it was very humbling. And it was exciting. It was wild. It was really, really wild.
Well, and that's such a great story, and I cannot thank you enough for saying, not to base your results on your competition on your life, because we have so many times where so many people do that, where their entire life is dependent on, how much they place or if they even place in their shows, and that's not going to be First of all, it's not healthy because you're what are you going to do then if you don't place? It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's just such a positive thing to just be able to just be able to get on that stage for so many people. That should be just the highlight, just to be able to get on that, because just the journey, like you said, the journey is 99% of it, because you're only going to be up
Yep.
on stage for such a short
Yep.
period of time. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I cannot say that enough. But now a fun question: what is your go-to post-show meal?
I don't know. See, it's changes. It used to be, so I was naive back in my amateur days, and I'd go for like the sugar, and then I'd be sick, and it was just not good. Um, Really, I just want food. Like I don't want junk. I don't want donuts. I don't want a burger. I want like actual food. I'm like, I want lamb shank and some polenta and some roasted eggplant. Can someone give me that, please? Like, I just want not chicken and broccoli. you know?
Oh, no, yeah, I totally get. I always say if I ever competed, I would just go to a Five Guys that night and just be like, "Here's $1,000. I'm buying you out for the night."
You sound like my husband.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm just gonna be like, I'm either gonna die, I'm gonna throw up, or I'm gonna pass out. But either way, I'm getting my money's worth. But probably the most important question that I love to ask on this podcast, because I don't think it's talked about at all on Instagram, and it should be, is that a lot of people don't realize that that look that you guys present on stage, that is not a sustainable look. We have
Correct.
so many people that, they just look at these photos and they just assume that because of all of the hard work and dedication that goes into looking like that, that it's sustainable. They don't realize that, you've taken out your water, you've taken out so many things that have given you that dry, that super lean look that, I mean, you're not going to be able to look like that
We
24/7. And
actually don't cut water.
oh, you
We
don't
don't.
cut water? Oh,
We
okay.
do not cut water, and we do not cut sodium.
Oh, okay.
No, I typically drink between 2 and 3 gallons of water a day.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm a little bit of an anomaly, but even peak week, we'll actually do a small water load. You can't do a big water load because I drink so much normally. But when you're intaking all of that water regularly, plus the high levels of sodium, your body is just constantly flushing, 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 flushing. If you stop the water, your body's going to be like, oh, wait a minute, we have nothing to flush everything out, and they're going to start holding on to the water. So, it for me personally, we don't do cutting of the water. The day of the show, I'm not going to drink water because I'm not going to drink water. But leading up into the show, we don't cut it.
well, everyone, we learn something new every single podcast. So we learn that. But like I said, just the amount that they don't realize that you has gone into it, just all of that hard work. Was that a struggle for you when you first realized that, hey, this look that I present on stage, I'm not gonna be able to keep this look. I mean, for most people, it might even last, if they're lucky, a day afterwards. And then even then, we've had stories where people put on, like 40 pounds within like a week just because they're not able to, be
Mm-hmm.
able to stop from eating, or they eat too much. But what has that experience been like for you? And has it gotten easier as your bodybuilding career has progressed?
It has gotten easier, but I never struggled with body image issues after a show, and maybe that has to do with partly my personality, just the way I am. But I also think it partly has to do with my husband, Jimmy, being my coach. Um, in the amateur days, he would stay more on top of me. I mean, we lived together. But even so, that being said, he's not there to police me. I'm an adult, I can make adult decisions. But I never struggled with the body issues, and I love food. So for me, it was almost like kind of the reverse issue where I would like want to eat too much and I would want to keep going, and I had to kind of like, all right, Lex, like pull yourself back. But I always feel comfortable in every facet of, my body, and you have to just be able to love yourself, period, no matter what. It's unrealistic to think that you're going to stay at 5% body fat all the time. I mean, that's just, you're going to starve yourself to death. That's not how it works. And you're that's not a healthy state to be. Bodybuilding isn't necessarily about, when you're doing a competition, when you're at a very high level, it's not about being super healthy. No, it's about obtaining a certain look, and you're pushing these boundaries, these extreme boundaries, and putting so much stress on your body and your hormones. And it's it can be detrimental if you try to sustain that long term. You have to be able to take a step back and let your body realign and, go back to homeostasis.
It's like I always say, it's just like starting a business. You got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle too. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that should honestly just be a slogan, like in everyone's gym, because there's so many times that we've heard where people, they didn't know that ahead of time, and then they started putting on weight and they didn't know what was going on. Well, first of all, they didn't have a coach. So that's the first thing I always tell them. I was like, well, you didn't have a coach. So that's probably the first thing that, you probably should have looked into.
I think I think in my experience, talking to people, and even in the early days for myself, when you do a show, I mean, everything revolves that leading up to that one day. And then that one day comes and goes.
Yep.
And then you kind of have this sense of, well, now what?
Yep.
What do I do now? What am I supposed to eat now? I don't have to eat chicken, but like I don't have to do cardio, but it's like you really need a plan before, like, before you have that show date, because you need to be able to, your body's in such a delicate state that you really need to be able to take care of it and slowly work your way back, into like, with the calories, and slowly lowering the cardio. And, you need to be able to just clean out your body and get it back to its happy place. But if you don't have a plan, it could be kind of a scary and lonely place to be in, because you kind of feel disillusioned at that point. You're like, well, now what? Like, what do I do now?
Oh, yeah. That's again, just having a plan and just again, I cannot iterate enough. Having a plan, having a coach, so, so important. But you mentioned it for just a second before, and I always love to bring this up because I had the number one sleep specialist on the planet on for probably about 6 months ago. First of all, he was from the UK, so he called us all the way from Oxford, and he had one of those British accents, those really posh British accents, where you felt like you gained 10 IQ points just from talking to him. Or like literally when he was talking, like right before the podcast, I was like, okay, you're just gonna talk the entire time, and I'm just gonna listen, okay? Because like
Uh,
you have the best, like just hearing you talk is like music to my ears. But we were just talking about the importance of sleep, and I said, I have a lot of bodybuilders or health and fitness people, and then we just talked about how important that is for muscle recovery
yep.
during your prep though, like you said, it can be hard to fall asleep, especially if you're low on some calories or especially if you're the way
Hmm.
that you're dieting. What are some ways that you try to get the proper amount of sleep? Because if I don't get the proper amount of sleep, and even if I'm eating, my regular somewhat healthy ish habits that I eat, not the best healthy, but I mean, even if I don't get, like my at least 6 hours of sleep, it's almost impossible for me to work out the next day. How are you able to do that?
When Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people experience insomnia when they get close to a show, when your body fat's really, really low, because you're basically in a controlled starvation at that point, but yet you're running on such high octane all the time. You know what I mean? You gotta, oh, do this, do that, and your brain's going 1,000 miles a minute. For me, I mean, I would take melatonin and Benadryl, and if I had to, I'd pop a half a Xanny, because I mean, I have to be able to sleep. And if you're just not sleeping at all, you're not recovering, you're going to feel like garbage. Your meals are going to be off. Your cortisol is going to be through the roof, and you're already stressed and run so thin anyway. It is something that just a lot of people struggle with close to shows, and there really is no like one size fits all in terms of how to help that. Drinking magnesium before bed can kind of help calm down. Melatonin, that's a natural remedy as well. um and then trying to keep like a regular schedule also, that can help with the sleeping as well.
I always say one of the best feelings in the world is after an extremely like hard and grueling workout, getting the proper amount of sleep. Like if I were to get, like maybe like 10 hours, just a little bit of extra sleep, you wake up feeling like, $1 million.
I can't remember last time I slept
Oh, well,
hours.
yeah. I mean, well, I work nights too. So normally, I don't, when I'm not doing the podcast, I normally can get a decent amount of sleep, but I sometimes even still for my job, I'm a supervisor now, but still sometimes they put me in the trucks and have me,
Hmm.
help out unload. So like even nights like last night where I got up, I got about, like 8 or 9 hours last night, but then there are some
Okay.
nights too where I get like 4 hours and I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
I can't, but yeah, sleep again, everyone, that's probably the most important thing when it comes to recovery. So try to just try anything really. I mean, for so many different people, there's different ways as to how they get the proper amount of sleep. But two of the questions that I love to ask all the health and fitness guests that I have on, for the first one, I mean, there were so many positive things for me when I started getting bigger and stronger and, going to the gym. But one of the negative things is you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or what bottled water or anything that's screwed on really, really tightly. I'm still at home with my parents until I move out in 2 months. And every single time they come home with groceries, I basically have to carry in the car and then carry in the groceries. Has that been a similar experience with you where people just take one look at you and they just assume that you can do favors for them?
Yes. At work, yeah, I'm always changing the water bottle or opening stuff. But I mean, I don't, for the most part, I don't mind. But sometimes people will ask me to do stuff, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And they're like, why not? I'm like, because I'm going to get hurt. You get injured. That's the death of bodybuilder. Yeah, I can't get injured. This is all aesthetics, man. This is all for show. I'm not a power lifter. I'm not a strong man. That's not what I'm here for.
I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. And again, I just want to reiterate on this podcast, there is a big difference between being a bodybuilder and being a powerlifter. Sure, there are a ton of bodybuilders that can lift actually some serious weight, but if you look at a powerlifter, 99% of the time, they don't look like they probably ever, lifted a weight in their entire day in their life. They might look like actually by like bodybuilding standards, they might look out of shape. Then there are these guys and girls going in there and benching, like 300, 400 pounds. I always got to say the most embarrassed I've ever been on this podcast. I had a guest on, she was 4'10" and a power lifter. Two of her three lifts, her squat and her deadlift, were more than me, and she was almost a foot and a half shorter
Do you
than
remember
me.
what they were? Do you remember what they were, their
It
numbers?
was like four, no, it was five something for 500 something for the deadlift, and then it was like 420, I think, for the squat. So
Beast.
yeah,
She's a beast.
and I only benched like 5 pounds more than her, but I was happy with that. I took that. I was like, okay, she did like 275 and I did 280 once for one rep, and I was like, okay, I got her beat, everyone. We're good. We're good now.
I
But
don't
yeah.
think that's a fair comparison, but
Yeah.
okay.
No, yeah, yeah, no, yeah. No, absolutely. But yeah, I mean I always say, there's a big difference between those two. But yeah, being 6'3" too, I always say it's a double-edged sword where, I could have zero muscle at all and people just be like, oh yeah, tall guy, come and help me. I mean, even this morning I got a text from a friend, hey, you want to come help me move this weekend? I'm moving out of my parents' house. I don't want to help you, but I will. But I always tell them I got to get my workout in before, because I'm not going to get, so tired lifting your stuff that I won't be able to work out then later on in the day. So I have to do that. But now, again, my audience, this is the audience favorite question, and I always say it's a multi-million-dollar idea. When it comes to clothes for fit women, I always say fit guys have their own problems. But I mean, I actually, one of the benefits, I think you said that you struggle sometimes with your shoulders. That might be a benefit when it comes to this question, because I always say if you have big, broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend, that we've heard all the time.
It's, dresses, it's a nightmare going clothes shopping.
And then
It's a
jeans are another thing. I mean, if you have a big lower body and a small waist, jeans are not made for that.
I found a brand though. If anyone's listening, I did.
What brand?
It's called YMI jeans. And they're actually, if you go on the website, all you see on this website are women with tiny, tiny, tiny waists, big butts, and big thighs. And it's amazing. They're really inexpensive. They're like $32. They're always running like sales and promotions and all kinds of stuff. And I think I have like 5 pair, all my skinny jeans are from there. And I own like 5 pairs of shorts from there, because it's the only thing where I don't get the gap in the back or in the front and that fits the thighs, because it's all the other jeans that nothing fits. But the YMI is specifically tailored for the little waist, big butt, big thigh community. So
that's something that I got to recommend then, because I always say, what is one thing? So, I mean, everyone, YMI jeans. Also, Freddies are one thing that we hear of all the time now here too.
I haven't heard of Freddies. I'll have to check
They're
them out.
huge in the UK. And then the guest that I had on yesterday from the US, I think she was from Oregon, said, yeah, that she swears by them. I think you have to get them online. But yeah, again, if anyone can come up with any more things, I mean, be more than appreciative. But probably the biggest myth that I love to debunk on this show, and I always say it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there's still so many women that have that fear where if they go into the gym and they touch one weight, they do one push-up or one pull-up, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight.
Yeah, they won't.
And I know. And I always say that it's like, you'd be the first ever trillionaire. Everybody and their brother. I mean, the government would probably kidnap you and try to steal your genetics so that they could probably give it to, every person on the planet. Did you have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I mean, I bet you hear that all the time now still. How do you like to respond to that?
I mean, it's insulting to say to someone, don't get too big, because that's like walking up to Michael Phelps and be like, don't swim too fast. You don't want to swim too fast. Like, that's insulting. I spend all of my time and energy and, and efforts to build and craft my physique. And so, it's people insecurities, it's people misunderstanding, it's people not fully understanding the weight behind the words of which they're saying. So, I mean, for the most part, I don't take, I take stuff with a grain of salt. I'm just like, yeah, okay, I won't. But, in reality, it's extremely insulting to say something like that. But, in the beginning, when I first started, you'd hear that a lot. And my response was always like, yo, I'm trying to get huge right now. So, like, you're going to be disappointed when I'm a lot bigger.
I always say, my story, I mean, I was going to the gym, getting bigger and stronger. One of my really good friends, she came up to me and she said, I see that you're making all these changes. I want to go to the gym, but I'm just afraid I'm going to get too bulky. And I told her, I said, look, the amount of weight that you carry in your purse when we go out to clubs, when we go out to get something to eat, she had a very heavy purse. I don't know what she had in there, if she had like a dead body or anything. I mean, it was like a 20 to 25 pound purse. So I was like, okay, you're lugging that thing around all day. You haven't put on an ounce of muscle from lugging that thing around. It's like, what is lifting a few weights going to do? And that sort of convinced her. And then she went into the gym and she really enjoyed it. But a part of that question too, that I love to add on, is that this is one thing that I think impacts women so much more than it does guys when it comes to positive things from weight training. It's the confidence boost that it gives you. I mean, I always say the confidence boost is such a positive thing, because you can take that and you can use it to impact so much. I mean, basically every single aspect of your life you can use from that confidence boost. How have you taken that confidence boost and used it to impact other areas of your life and make it better?
I think for me, bodybuilding has not only given me confidence, it's also given me another outlook on life. And I sort of approach things differently versus how I did before, because I have an appreciation for what goes into this sport and what it means to be an athlete and what it means to do what I need to do. That a lot of people don't understand, which is fine. I don't expect them to understand, because you're not in that circle. Bodybuilding is a very niche sport, and it's, to a lot of people, it's just like weird. Like they're like, I don't understand. Why can't you just eat an apple? It's healthy. And you're like, nah, I'm good, man. Like it's cool. Don't worry about it. So it's fine, but it just gives you, it's cool because the bodybuilding community, since, the inception of Instagram, people can say what they want about social media. There are pros and cons for everything. But for me, I found that Instagram is kind of the ESPN for bodybuilding. Without Instagram, you don't know who's doing what show. You don't know who's working with what coach. You don't know what's going on, who's getting ready here. This happened, that happened, blah, 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 blah. And
I wouldn't be able to get any of these guests on my podcast, probably.
exactly. And, it creates a sense of community. So it's cool because it's like you're a part of something that's very individualistic. Bodybuilding is a singular sport. It's me versus me. It's all about me and the effort that I put in. And then I'm on stage alone doing my thing. It's not something where a team is together. So if one person's having a bad day, it doesn't really matter. If you're having a bad day, you're SOL because it's just you. But being on Instagram with the community kind of gives you, a sense that you're not alone. Because for people who, like you said, maybe not with a coach, not with a team, doing it by themselves, it gives them a sense of like, I'm not crazy, and loving this is there's a ton of other people who are doing the same thing that I'm doing, and you get to bounce off ideas and, meet people. So, it gives you the confidence to know that you're part of something bigger than yourself. And I don't know. And that's kind of cool because it's kind of like being part of like a little club, like, yeah, I'm a pro bodybuilder.
100%. Yeah. And that's one of the many positives that I like to talk about with Instagram. And now we go on to the questionnaire, where I like to ask our guests here about a half a dozen or so health and fitness related questions. And we like to see how our answers stack up to everyone else that we've had on the show. So for our first question, what is one item that you always need to have in your fridge?
Eggs. Love eggs.
I used to always, have eggs, but I got to the point where I was eating them so often that just digestively, like it wasn't ending up well. So now
My
I cut
husband
down on
can't
them a little
stand
bit.
them. My
Yep.
husband's like so over eggs. I love them. I
Yep.
love eggs.
No, yeah, I mean, there was a point in time, but the most shocking answer that I've ever heard on this podcast was mustard, because I never knew that, with bodybuilders, how it's 0
Oh,
calories,
yeah.
0 fat. They just douse everything in mustard.
Condiments are key. I'm a
Condiments.
condiment Nazi, so I feel that person. I feel
Yep,
you.
yep, condiments. That's one thing that I've learned. But now, out of all of your followers that you have on Instagram, what do you think would be one thing that they'd be surprised to find out about you if they met you in person?
How short I am. People think I'm a lot taller than I am, and whenever they meet me, they're like, "Wow, you're like really short." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm tiny.
How tall are you?
I'm 4'11". Yeah, I'm
Wow.
4'11", but people think that I'm like 5'5", 5'7". People think that I'm like much, much taller, and then you see me in the lineup, and I look like a midget.
Well, that's even more impressive. I mean, that's just awesome too, because I love having the different varieties and how. Like, I mean, I always talk. So now that adds another question onto the questionnaire, because I always like to talk about, when I have a taller guest, the tall people struggles that go in the gym. What are some shorter problems that you go into the gym, especially because sometimes the equipment, it's not made for someone who's short, and it's
No,
also not made for someone who's tall.
yeah, doing any lat pull down requires me to like do gymnastics on anything to get my back into the wrist straps, and then you have to find the certain brands of equipment that work best with my body because my limbs are shorter and put together a little differently. But yeah, the biggest challenge is doing any pull down type movements, and even rows sometimes because I'm so short. I hit, so I'll put like a block underneath my feet to give me more distance between the row and when I'm pulling. So, those are just like little things that you just deal with.
Probably the one thing though that you can use the squat rack basically as a pull-up bar though too. That's one thing that I've seen a lot of short people especially do. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so many different things that people, of different sizes like to go through. So that's why I love asking that question. But now if someone were to walk up to you and say, Alexis, we made the decision that, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Ooh, that's a good question. More consistent judging. But, that's a double-edged sword. That's a double-edged sword because the judges have to work with what's on stage at that time. It's hard to say we're going for this particular look if you're judging a show and that particular look is not on stage that day. You have to, and they're human. It's a subjective sport. So your day could be any given day, just depending on how the judges are feeling, looking, how, so many different variables that go into it. But I mean, I think overall, sometimes the lines get blurred in terms of how conditioned is too conditioned, how conditioned is not conditioned enough. And I think maybe for women, that's probably the biggest struggle, more so than shape and symmetry and balance, is the condition, how much conditioning is actually warranted within the different divisions. And right now, I mean, figure is crazy. You got to be mad conditioned to be on the pro figure stage, and then physique is just. I mean, Eleanor
it's getting close to bodybuilding, basically.
I mean, it's we all have striated glutes. We all have. It's just the striations are everywhere in the veins, and it's just it gets a little like it's a little crazy.
Yeah.
It's just a little crazy. I mean, you do what you got to do because that's what's being awarded.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, for me to say, oh, the judging needs to change, it may not necessarily be the judging. It may need to be the actual categorization of conditioning within the women's and even bikini. Sometimes on the amateur side, it's a little bit all over the place. So it's like you never kind of know what they're looking for.
Yeah, I wish that they'd have more consistency too, because you have these stories where people just, they might place first in a show one week, and then with the same condition that they're going to place, they might not even place the next show just because some of the judges might want a little bit more of a leaner look. They might want a little bit more of a bigger look. They might want, a more shredded look. I mean, it's so hard to figure that out. But what was your family and friends' reaction when you decided to start bodybuilding? Were they always supportive, or did it take them some time to fully hop on the bandwagon?
No, they were fully supportive from the start. I think my mom is like the biggest bodybuilding fan on earth. Like, she's on Instagram. She knows what's going on in the bodybuilding world before I do. They come to all my shows. They follow me. They follow all my friends. They're really involved. They're big fans of the sport, and that really means a lot to me to have that support from my mom and my dad and my stepfather and my stepmother. To have like everybody on board is just. It's really, really, it's really great. My mom and my stepfather, they travel whenever I compete around. If I'm in Toronto or if I'm in Pittsburgh, whatever, they'll drive or they'll fly, to come see me. When I went to the Olympia last year, I think I had like 15 people come out to Vegas. Yeah, there were like 15 of my like family and friends who all flew out, and like that's just so amazing to me that all these people are taking money and time out of their life to fly across the country to watch me get in a bathing suit and pose on stage. Like, that just blows my mind. It's just really, it really means a lot to me.
Well, also any time to play some blackjack too. I mean, I'm in for that, as well.
There were some fun times in Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I happen to live in a state where the gambling age is 18, just because of we have all the Native Americans own the casinos. So
right.
so literally by my house we have 3 casinos within a 5-mile distance. So yeah, you wonder where I make and lose a lot of money. So it's a thing out here. But now the 2 questions left in the questionnaire. So if you were able to go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, what do you think would be the best piece of advice you would give her?
Get your in the gym now. I was very, I'm never going to go to the gym. I don't like the gym. I don't know why. I guess I had the misconception that a lot of people had about it. I don't think I understood the purpose. I was like, well, what's the point? And I would, if I could go back, I would kick my 18-year-old self butt right into that gym. That's what I would do.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would say the same thing. I mean, I would also give it, some stock advice and be like, hey, invest in this company, But for our last question of the questionnaire, if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in bodybuilding? Where would you like to be at just in your regular life? What are some goals that you would like to have achieved if we were to talk to you a year from today?
Oh, that's another good one. Just, I don't know. A year from today. I would want to be, knowing that my husband and I we're happy and we're healthy, and that my family, because everybody in my family, we're all doing good. We're all happy. We're all in a good place right now. In terms of bodybuilding, I would like right now, next year, I'm actually taking the first full 365 off season that I ever have in my career. I've never done that before. I've always been compete. And, this goes back to what I said earlier about not revolving your entire bodybuilding career around a plastic trophy, because this season, I was 3rd call outs in Pittsburgh. I was 2nd call outs in New York, and Toronto Pro, which I won last year, which got me to the Olympia. I placed 7th. And, it was kind of a wake up call for me in that it was a good time for me to be like, okay, I hear you judges. Okay, body, I hear you, body. Let's take a step back and do a 365. And this time next year, I will have liked to have started my season either with Puerto Rico or Toronto. But really, I want to spend this next year living my life, getting back to just loving the gym and just like lifting the weight and just enjoying being a bodybuilder and not have the stress and anxiety and pressure of a show and the stage, because the stage isn't going anywhere. Everyone's always so anxious to get to the stage. I'm like, well, where's it going? Where's the stage going? It's not going anywhere. Get on the stage when you're ready. And I think this year, because I went to the Olympia last year, original plan after Toronto last year was going to be to take a full off season, but making it to the Olympia, you go to the Olympia. So, that kind of pushed our plans out, and then we started prep. So for me, next year, I really want to be mentally in a different place. And physically, I really want to create a completely new physique for me to bring to the stage so that when I do get on stage, I'm undeniable.
Yeah. Oh, again, we can't wish you more than the best of luck with that, because honestly, everyone go and look at her Instagram. First of all, you'll be inspired to go and, start squatting a little bit more, because I can just say the lower body is absolutely insane. But for our last question of the podcast, I always like to ask, if someone were to walk up to you on the street and say, Alexis, you look amazing, I really want to get in shape. What is the best piece of advice that you try to give people who are just trying to get started? Because for so many people, I've found the hardest thing is just taking that first step in the gym, because I was one of those people too, where I got to make the excuse. If it's a Saturday, oh, I'm not going to work out until Monday. I'm one of those weird OCD people where it's got to be, like if I get started at the start of the week,
All
it's
the
better than doing it.
stars have to
Yep.
align.
All the stars have to align.
Everything has to be perfect.
I have to start working out when it hits on the hour. So if it's like 6 o'clock, it has to be 6 o'clock exactly. If it goes to 6:01, nope, I got to wait until it hits like 6:15 or 6:30 before I start. I'm one of those like weird people like that too. But I always have found, once you step into the gym, it is so hard to leave the gym. What tips do you like to try to give people just to get them started?
So I'm going to use my mother for an example, because she tends, love you, mom, she gets a lot of anxiety thinking about all the things she has to do and all the things she wants to do. And, oh, I'm going to have to do this and I want to do this. And I'm like, stop, calm down. I'm like, first of all, it's not always about what you have to do. It's also about things that you can stop doing. For example, she's a snacker. So I said, okay, Ma, let's do two things. 2 daily goals. Every day, I want you to just walk for 30 minutes. That's all you gotta do. Walk for 30 minutes. I'm like, and don't snack. So it's something that you're doing and it's something that you're not doing. And every day, just make that a little goal. That's it. Just a daily goal. Don't worry about, next week, next month. Just every day, make those 2 things a priority. And then eventually it becomes her lifestyle. Eventually she's not only doing half an hour, she's doing 40 minutes, she's doing an hour, because, she gets into it. And, snacking, she's like, what's snacking? So sometimes it's not always trying to overwhelm yourself with so much. And I want to look like this and I have to do all this. And I saw this online and this person says this and I've got to only eat, eggs and drink water 3 times a day. Like, no, just make it small, simple, obtainable steps. And all of that builds up. It's the consistency of achieving those small goals over time that builds into the ultimately your bigger goal. So
again, she's just talking straight truth right here, because I always say that's the number one thing too, is just, small steps. If you go in there and you just work your butt off for the first day and work out for like 2 hours, you're not going to want to go in the next day. I'm just going to be completely honest. Just small steps, just increment it slowly. But now lastly, is there any sponsors or any people that you'd like to give a shout out to?
My husband, Jimmy, Mr. Sullivan, my coach, my best friend, my husband. He's my everything, and he's my support system and my whole world. And he, every day I learn something from him, and he just, we're like 2 peas in a pod. So for me, the fact that he loves bodybuilding and that I've come into this sport and that, I love it as much as him, is just, I love you, babe. And my family, they've been super, super supportive, and all my friends, they've been great. And like the online community of Instagram has like just really been amazing. I get some really, really heartfelt, messages from people, or people that say, you've inspired me to start doing this, or you've really helped me work on my form on that. And sometimes you don't realize that when you're speaking, on Instagram, you're speaking to a much larger crowd that I don't always think about. Like I post stuff and then it kind of goes into the universe. But really what you're saying can not only have effect on that person, but if that person says it to someone else and that person says it to something else, it's kind of like a drop of water, like in a lake, like, the ripples reverberate out. So I just really want to thank everybody, for being so supportive and all the love and, words of encouragement and, just being there for me as I just do what I love to do. It's great. It's a great feeling.
And again, you guys, everyone, go and give her a follow, Mrs. Sullivan. I'll leave a link to all that on Instagram. First of all, like I told them before, they need to change their last name from Sullivan to Sullivan because that's just so awesome. But again, Alexis, we cannot thank you enough for being on the podcast. It was so great to have you on and share your story. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.